Good morning, Rutherford County. We are so happy to be back with you today. This is Hannah Davies and my mom, Connie Davies. We shared with you earlier in the week about some of the righteous rescuers during the time of the Holocaust and how there are so many important lessons that God wants us to learn, even in investigating those lives and others in history who have really risked their lives because they loved someone so much. We talked last time about the importance of the love of Jesus and what it really means to love someone. Of course, the Bible is very clear, God's instructions to us. God is love. The love only comes from God. And as we serve Him, He puts that deep love in our heart for others. We talked last time about the verse that Jesus said that no one has greater love than to lay down their life for their friends. And we began to talk about what does it really mean to lay down your life? What does it really mean to give up your desires, your wants, your goals, and really find true life serving other people and looking out for the needs of others? From the beginning of the Bible, God established that we are our brother's keeper, even with the situation with Cain and Abel when he murdered his brother. And God puts on not only a command on us to love, but it is an accountability. It is a command to look out for and care for the needs of others and to stand in the gap. And we're going to hear today some more examples about those who not only just love someone, but they showed that love through strong determination. If it meant losing their life, risking their life, whatever they had to do, because they truly loved another human being. And that's the heart and the conviction that we want to have. And we just want to share with you again today what God has put in our hearts, because there are so many lessons that we all need to learn from this history. It's very vital. Back in the book of Esther, the Jewish people were at serious risk of extermination. And God placed Esther in the king's palace when the law was that she could not go into the king without being invited, without permission, and she had to make a decision. Was she going to obey God or be afraid of what could happen to her? And we talked last time about that determination that rose in her heart through the urging of her uncle to say, if I perish, I perish. And now is the time that I've been called. The Bible says that each one of us has been called for such a time as this. So whatever your walk in life is today, remember through the stories that we share with you today that you are called. I mean, God has chosen you to help someone in some way. And don't underestimate that gift that is on the inside of you.
Exactly. God certainly has equipped people with the gifts and the callings of God. You may not think that you're a minister or that you have any special position in life. But one thing that we see in the Holocaust, Hannah, was that people of all walks, no matter what profession, what station they were, what class they may have been in, that God was able to use anyone that was willing and able, and God gives that equipment. And one of the things that we see many times is we don't even understand sometimes how it is that God has equipped us. But the first thing that we're equipped with is a heart of compassion and a heart of love for people and wanting to be there to help. We also mentioned last week, even giving a few examples of how that works in our own lives. Yes, we're going to be giving some examples of people during the Holocaust that risked their lives. But, every day we have opportunities to reach out to people in need. We may not have to literally lay our lives down like they had to in the Holocaust, but sometimes we have to go out of our way to do a kind thing to help someone. And that's what these examples should inspire us, cause us to examine our own hearts to see where we're walking the love of Jesus. Are we aware of the needs of people around us? And should things ever get to the point where we literally have to lay our lives down for someone, then we'll have that work done in our hearts. We'll be ready. We'll be ready. And that's what we want as Christians. We always want to be ready. We want to follow the example of Jesus. Jesus laid his life down for us. And we, in turn, should lay our lives down for other people. Also, it says in the book of James that many times we show our faith in God by our works, by what we do on a daily basis. And so God is looking from heaven. He knows exactly where we are, what we're doing, and he knows what it is that he's requiring of us. And we just need to have a heart and mind that's open and ready to obey the voice of God.
Yes. And remember, Jesus said that he who does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. But it defines that, and it says, then it goes on to say, whoever finds his lower life here on this earth will lose the higher life. Whoever goes after the pleasures, the desires, the money, all the satisfaction for themselves. And that's what we live in. We live in a society that people are lovers of self.
That's right.
And they're losing the awareness of anyone around them.
That's right.
And it's so sad because we have people who are hurting and who are desperate around us and who need the gift of God in us. And we need the gift of God in those around us. We all have needs, but we all have so much that God wants us to give. And in Matthew 10:38 and 39, the verse I was referring to, Jesus said, whoever loses his lower life on my account will find it, the higher life. And that's what we want. We want to go after the things that are eternal. What does God really have for our lives? And I mean, the greatest joy we have, the only joy we have, is obeying him and giving our lives to do whatever he's called us to do. So going back to some of just the areas we talked about, if you were with us on the previous radio program, we're just going to recap just briefly and go into a little bit more depth on the type of people who risk their lives to help and to save other lives during the years of the Holocaust. The Holocaust was a systematic, bureaucratic extermination of more than 6 million Jews and many other targeted groups. It wasn't just the Jews, from disabled people, anyone that the Nazi government deemed as inferior. And we know that is not the way God sees any one of us. It was totally a plan of the devil. But it was very serious. And over 6 million Jews were exterminated. This was a systematic plan. And everyone was really ordered to be complicit in this plan. But everyone still had a choice what they did. And in that time of challenge, were they going to obey God and the conscience of their heart? Right. Or were they going to obey this, the decrees that were going out? There were just a few people in Europe who risked their lives, and those cannot be forgotten. It is vital to study these people. And I think one of the quotes that really touches my heart is a world leader later said, these were drops of love in an ocean of poison. If that gives you an idea of how bad the hatred and the goal was to exterminate and wipe out the Jewish people. There were these people who were rescuers, whether it was feeding someone, like feeding a Jew. They hid Jews in homes or on their property in amazing places, behind walls, in attics, wherever they could find. Little children were placed in, cabinets and taken care of, taken in and out, whatever they had to do, providing passports or identification papers. And we'll hear about a couple that did that today, who took their stand in their place in leadership to be able to help others, taking in children, and then collaborative rescue, where you may do one part, I do another part, and everyone has a little part to work together to get someone to safety. Those were the main means of rescue. But remember that every one of these rescuers or helpers were absolutely risking their lives by doing anything to help these targeted groups. The dangers of betrayal were imminent constantly. I've been studying some of these people more in the last few days. And really, I read story after story. A young math teacher who took a family in, and just before, they felt like they had safety, the next door neighbor would, betrayed him. So many stories. There were a lot who lost their lives, even young people. But they knew, they had something in their heart of true conviction that it didn't matter to them. They were going to stand as families or as young people or whatever age they were to try to help these people. There were rescuers from all walks of life, like I said, from school teachers to farmers, professors, diplomats, policemen. There were generals. There were people in all walks of life who did this. I wanted to talk to you first. We just mentioned collaborative rescue, where it was a joint effort on the part of everyone. And think about this, to stand up against a wicked government at the time, to stand up against a wicked law and obey what they knew God wanted them to do. In Denmark, it is amazing the efforts that were made for Denmark's rescue of their Jews. Denmark had about 7,800 Jews at the time of the Holocaust, and they were able to save between 90 and 95% of those Jews. And this was not the effort of just one person. This was a major group effort, but it showed a conviction on the part of the group, of people of all walks of life. It was widespread participation in Denmark. Hundreds of people in September 1943, when they heard that the orders were coming to deport and begin to exterminate the Jews, get them out of Denmark into camps where they would be killed.
And one thing I want to share too, remember that the Holocaust happened during World War II. And actually the persecution, discrimination of the Jews actually began in 1933 when Hitler comes to power. But as the war gets closer and closer in 1939, the pressure gets greater and greater, and the avenues of rescue get less and less. So the setting of all of this is during this period of time when Hitler was in Germany. He had taken over the government there, and as they began to invade other countries, the threat was going to other nations of Europe to exterminate the Jewish people.
Yes. And in this effort, intellectuals, priests, policemen, doctors, blue-collar workers, every walk of life joined together. People searched the phone books very quickly to find every Jewish name in there in some of the towns and warn those people, warn the Jews and get them out. Rabbis stopped their services and said, everyone, we're going to get to safety. They were determined. And when you read some of the quotes of the rescuers, those in Denmark, and what it felt like, it was very strong in their hearts. Mm-hmm. We will obey God rather than man. One even said, she was questioned by German authorities. Did you save some Jews? Did you help? She said, yes, I've just found true life. I found what my life was for. They were not ashamed. They absolutely joined in a mission. What the means of rescue was to get the people onto boats and get them safely into Sweden, because Sweden would protect them. And I think you have a little more to share about that.
Yeah, this is a very interesting story. And, in our travels with the Holocaust Museum, we get opportunities to meet people that were either survivors of the Holocaust or rescuers of the Holocaust, or even sometimes military personnel at that time. But we had an opportunity to meet someone who was actually part of the Danish rescue. Her family was hiding the Jews in their homes in a port city there across from Sweden. And she was telling us the story. She was a little girl, and this was so done undercover that people didn't talk about it. They were able to get messages to one another and coordinate this effort. They had to do everything really in secret. And what they were doing is gathering the Jewish people in these port towns, and they were actually hiding them in fishing boats. Now, when you say a boat, you know that a fishing boat is not very large. So they were having to hide these people in the hulls of fishing boats and take them over into Sweden, which was a neutral country, and that's where they would be have their refuge. But this lady, of course, an elderly lady now, very distinguished, was talking about as a girl, she knew something was going on in her house, but she didn't know what it was. She just knew her mom and dad were acting a little bit strange. But she said one night, and they didn't say anything to her because she was a social little girl that liked to talk a lot to her friends at school. So they had to keep everything quiet with her. But one night she woke up in the middle of the night, and she goes into the living room, and she said all she sees were eyes, hundreds of eyes looking at her, and it frightened her at first. Well, then obviously her parents had to tell her what was going on. And so she became part of the effort of helping her mom and dad get these people, this little girl helping her mom and dad. And they would take these people down to these fishing boats and hide them in the hull. And there were times with the children where they would actually give them a medication to put them to sleep temporarily, put them in the fish boxes and pile fish on top of them to get them over to the other side. The Danish fishermen there were very clever because they knew that the Nazis were going to catch on to things pretty quick. So they finally decided that they would get swabs of alcohol. When the Nazis started bringing dogs in to sniff out for these people that were being hidden, they would pet the dogs on the nose and with this alcohol swab, and the dog would lose their sense of smell, and they were able to get these people out of Denmark into Sweden safely. And they saved, what did you say, hundreds?
Yeah, they ended up saving about 7,200, I think, of their population, 90 to 95%.
But the effort of this, every night there would be fishing boats going across the water into Sweden to save these people. And amazing effort. That was a collaborative effort. Here were fishermen that used their boats, used their what they had available to them. And, again, I think, Hannah, that shows us that whatever we have. The other night we were sharing at my home about the little boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. That's all he had. But God was able to use what resources he had to help other people. And that's what God is wanting us to pay attention to in these stories is what resources do we have? What is it that God has equipped us with a talent or with natural resources that might help someone in need?
That's right. Mom, did you want to talk about some of the diplomats and leaders who took a strong stand no matter what they were told to do?
Absolutely, because, in the Holocaust, it was the government of Germany that was persecuting the Jewish people. And again, the laws that were being passed, over 2,000 laws against the Jews. But we have other people that represented governments that used their positions of authority to save the Jews. One is a gentleman by the name of Sukihara. Sukihara was a diplomat, believe it or not, from Japan. Now, we know that during World War II, Japan was part of the Axis powers. They were the enemy of the United States and the enemy of any of the freedom-loving people of the world at that time. But there was a diplomat that was stationed in Lithuania. Well, as the Nazis began to come as the war began, they came into Poland. There were a lot of the Polish Jews that were needing to find a way of escape. Now, by the time the war had started, some of the avenues of immigration had shut down. The doors were closed because as more and more people tried to get out of Germany, some of the nations of the world decided, we don't want these Jews. They were trying to flee for their lives. And by the time the war started, almost every door was shut. And so these Jewish people were looking for ways of escape. And Sukihara happened to be in Lithuania, and some of those Polish Jews were actually coming into Lithuania for refuge. Well, they weren't going to be staying there. They were looking for a place to run, and they were needing transit visas to make their way to some Dutch colonies. And Sukihara was in a position of authority representing the Japanese government, where God compelled him. Mm-hmm. When these people showed up at the consulate's office, God compelled him to put aside all of his tradition of obedience that the Japanese are known for, put aside that and to go with his heart, to go with his conscience. And he and his wife spent over 3 weeks, day and night. The man did not sleep. He did not eat. He worked constantly filling out these transit visas for people, and actually did up to 300 visas a day. That would be what they would normally expect to do in a month. In one day, this man did this, and he knew it was going to be at risk, maybe not of his life, but he knew that it would probably mess, his career as a consulate would be over, which would be a great hardship on his family. But he and his wife together worked day and night to save these people, and many people owe their lives to Sukihara today.
And he ended up providing over 3,500 of those visas after he had been ordered to get out of the country.
Exactly.
It's dangerous.
Exactly.
But he did what God told him to do, and I think his wife even said later how, they looked out the window of the building they were stationed in, and there were these people, just flooded out there hoping for help, hoping for someone to listen to their cry. And, they even had their hands, they were praying. And she said, how could you turn these people down?
Exactly.
But they knew the risk they were taking. And I love what he says, what he said, I may have to disobey my government, but if I don't, I would be disobeying my God.
That's right.
And he knew, he knew one day we're going to stand before God, and we're going to be accountable to do what God told us to do no matter what. I think it's always amazing to study, too. There were royalty, there were princes and people from other countries who stepped in at this time. And when it looked like, that was very, very risky. But there were other countries in Europe who were, more neutral countries at the time, but they did step in to save groups of children or save Jewish people. Amazingly, a Nazi lieutenant, Albert Battle, a Nazi lieutenant, you think, well, he's going to have to follow his orders or he'll lose his position. No, that wasn't the case. He was ordered to get a whole group of Jewish people across to a deportation center to be taken away. And he defied the orders, ordered the bridge to be blocked, and took over 100 Jews to barracks of a local military command to protect them. He only received a letter of reprimand. God honored these people, whether they made it in life or not. We know that God saw the true conviction of their hearts. And we cannot discuss the rescuers without missing Raoul Wallenberg.
Oh, yes.
He's one of our favorites.
That's one of my favorites, I guess. I have a daughter-in-law from Sweden, and, when she came to America, we started learning about Raoul Wallenberg because we were working in the Holocaust, and she was saying that all her life, the people in Sweden wondered whatever happened to Raoul. This story is absolutely incredible, but this man was born into a very wealthy family in Sweden. The Wallenberg family was kind of like the Rockefellers of America, right under royalty. And of course, in Sweden, they still had a king and a queen, and they do today. But his family was right underneath them socially. His grandfather, Gustav Wallenberg, actually raised Raoul because his dad died when his mother was pregnant with him at only 7 months. So he grew up with a grandfather that was also his father. Well, his grandfather loved the Jewish people and really raised Raoul to love the Jewish people. Well, Raoul was very well educated. He came to the United States for part of his education at the University of Michigan, went back into Sweden, was working in business. His grandfather made arrangements for him to actually go into Israel for a period of time to learn business as well, because the Jewish people are very good at business. So he was in Israel at the time that some of the Jewish people were leaving Europe to come to Israel at that time, Palestine at the time, to escape what was going on in Germany. He heard their stories and he was moved with compassion. At the time, he was involved with business. He left Israel, went back into to Sweden, and found out about a gentleman who was doing work, a businessman doing some work in Budapest, in Hungary. Well, in 1944 is when the Nazis invaded Hungary. And this was the last country that was invaded by Nazi Germany. They went in there and immediately started deporting the Jews to Auschwitz. Well, at that time, the American government decided finally, after years and years of people begging them to do something to stop what was going on, they finally decided to open up the War Refugee Board. And they needed someone who was a neutral person from another country to run the rescue effort there in Budapest. And Raoul Wallenberg's name came up in the Department of State. He was approached. Would you go into Budapest? Well, he was already familiar with Budapest, which was perfect. We talked earlier today about how God equips you, and sometimes he has you doing things in your life that years later you find out why God had you do it. So he goes into Budapest and he says, I'll do this under two conditions. One, I want the permission of the King of Sweden to issue passports to these people. And I need all the money that will be necessary for the rescue effort. The American government gave him money. He opened up safe houses in Budapest, and he, again, organized a rescue effort, much like what we saw with the Danes. But this time he's issuing these passports to these Hungarian Jews and making them instant Swedish citizens. Mm-hmm. Amazing. And he did over 100,000 people he saved doing this, issuing these passports. Now, these people didn't speak Swedish. They knew no one in Sweden. But they had that piece of paper, that document was what was used to save their lives. And Raoul stood in front of the Hungarian Era Cross at times and claimed that these were his Swedish citizens.
Even while they threatened him with guns.
Threatened him with guns. He was at gunpoint, was trying to stop what was going on with these deportations. And also at the time that the Nazis were deporting people to Auschwitz, the Hungarian Era Cross, who was like the Hungarian Nazi unit, they were taking people to the Danube River and they were lining them up and shooting them. Raoul Wallenberg went back into the safe house and organized a rescue effort, found people that knew how to swim, and they were jumping in the Danube. I mean, he was a daring young man who had a heart of compassion. He was like 30 or 31 years old at this time, a young man, very wealthy, very prominent, could have done anything with his life, and he laid everything aside as a young man to help save the Jewish people. It's an incredible story that we share with our young people because it shows a heart of a man who could have had he had everything, but was willing to lose every bit of it. And what happened in 1945 is that Stalin found out about him, said he wanted to talk to him about some things, and the KGB came, picked him up, and took him to Moscow, and he was never seen again. His family spent years looking for him and trying to find about his whereabouts. Never did find out. But Raoul Wallenberg was given a Congressional Gold Medal of Honor by the United States government, and one of our own congressmen, I don't know if some may remember, Tom Lantos, who was a U.S. congressman, was actually saved by Raoul Wallenberg. And so he's someone that if you're interested in looking at the righteous among the nations, it's a very interesting story. There's a lot more details that we could share. But again, a 30-year-old man who had everything right in front of him, his life to look forward to, and he gave it all up to save people he did not know.
Yes. And we're only scratching the surface. There are a lot more stories of people who saved a lot of people. But again, there were very few. And I was really touched by this teacher I was studying in Belgium who, when they were ordered, the Jews were ordered to wear the yellow star patch. And really, it was a mark of humiliation. It was not at all a thing, to honor them. It was totally to humiliate them. So when her Jewish students were ordered to wear those stars, she ordered that they wear aprons to cover the stars while they were in class. She was not going to let them be humiliated like that. And then she ended up hiding a lot of Jewish children. This is a Belgian teacher again. And at one point, she had a lot of Jewish children hidden in the school. And here came the Nazi groups. The Gestapo came in at night, found all these children. And who did they begin to question? The teachers. So she was asked, are you not ashamed to teach the Jews? And you see the boldness. You see the boldness that Raoul Wallenberg had. Mm-hmm. God gave these people boldness. Mm-hmm. We see it in the Bible. Peter and John said, when they,
exactly.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Mm-hmm. We must obey God rather than man. And that was the heart that they had. And when she was asked, are you not ashamed to teach the Jews? She bravely retorted, aren't you ashamed to wage war on these Jewish children? I mean, there's a fight for humanity and a conscience that God gives every one of us.
Exactly.
That we should be aware all the time of the needs of others and be praying for those. Maybe we can't meet everyone's needs, but our heart is that we want to do whatever God leads us to do in that capacity. And I was studying another widow, a older lady, a widow who sheltered victims, even in her single room, one-room apartment, and she had full of people. And several people in there. And she was asked about the motives for her help. So she said, what are the motives for my help? She said, if a fellow human being is in distress and I can help him, then it becomes my duty and my responsibility. If I were to refrain from doing so, I would betray the task that life and God demands from me. She said, human beings make up a big unity and they strike themselves and one another in the face when they do injustice to another. These are my motives. These people were bold. And let God put a boldness in your heart that you're going to obey Him and lay down your life for people. I think of the story often as well in Luke 16, when there was the utterly destitute man who was helpless, who needed help. And Jesus uses this example. His name was Lazarus, and he was begging at the rich man's door for some help. And that rich man would not help him. And later, that man was taken into paradise, to heaven, and the rich man was burning in hell, begging for mercy. And God said it was too late. That's a warning to us. From every one of these stories, let's ask God to put a deeper conviction in our hearts that we want to obey Him.
Yes. And there was one thing too. I'm going to go one more second. Albert Einstein, who was a Jew, a German Jew, made this statement, and this is what we need to remember. He said, the world is a dangerous place, and can we not say that today? Not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. We don't want to be those that look on and do nothing. We want to be those in the midst of everything that's going on today. Is there something I can do to help someone today? Look for those opportunities today in your life, and you'll find your life.
That's
and
right.
You won't lose it. You'll find it. We thank you for listening again to our radio show today. We're here on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings from 8:30 to 9 o'clock, and you can look at some of our other videos at wordoffaithfellowship.org. Again, thank you for listening in. Y'all have a great day.
Yes, thank you.